Hi there and welcome to Anime in Minutes. In today's video, we'll be recapping the anime Goblin Slayer. We hope you enjoy. The story begins with a cute blonde girl applying to be an adventurer. She signs some papers and is accepted into the Adventurers Guild at the lowest rank. Right away, a small group of beginner adventurers approach her and ask her to join their team as their healer. It turns out the blonde girl is actually a priestess with magic abilities. She decides to join them and they embark on their first mission. They enter a cave inhabited by goblins to clear them off. Things seem to be going well when suddenly goblins sneak up from behind and attack them. The team members are all getting chopped down gruesomely by the goblins, and a woman in the team is kidnapped as the goblins force themselves on her. The priestess is able to get away with one of her teammates, but the goblins catch up to her. Before the goblins can do anything serious to her, a man in heavy armor comes to the rescue. He introduces himself as the Goblin Slayer and asks the girl to help him fight off the goblins in the cave. They succeed with pretty good success, and they're even able to save the woman who had been kidnapped. After being saved by the Goblin Slayer, the priestess decides to join him and continues on as an adventurer. We are then given a flashback of two children talking to each other, a memory of the Goblin Slayer talking to his friend, the girl with the red hair. Flash forward and the woman is greeting the Goblin Slayer from her window as he's checking for any goblin tracks around the farmland. It turns out he's living with her and her uncle. Goblin Slayer then goes to town in search for more goblin-related quests. The other adventurers look down on him for this, as they would much prefer more glorious battles against dragons. He invites the priestess to join him on his quest and they depart. He has implemented an amazing strategy to fight the goblins, resorting to trapping them and burning them to death before going in to kill any stragglers. We get another flashback of the Goblin Slayer as a child, as his village is being attacked by goblins. We see where the hatred for these goblins come from, as he shows absolutely no mercy to them after what they did to him. We then move on to a high elf, dwarf, and lizardman at the Adventurers Guild looking for the Goblin Slayer, having heard many rumors of him. The Goblin Slayer agrees to discuss matters with them in a meeting room. They tell him they need his help to slay goblins that are gathering under the Demon Lord, trying to take over the world. The Goblin Slayer only agrees because he gets to slay goblins, and it puts the team in shock. The High Elf, Dwarf, Lizardman, Priestess, and Goblin Slayer get together to create a goblin slaying team. They go to an underground fortress to exterminate the goblins, but once inside, they find an elf being tortured. It deeply disturbs the High Elf, and she begins to grow a hatred for goblins. They continue deeper underground and find a horde of goblins. They set up spells and are able to kill all of the goblins in their sleep. Mission success. However, suddenly an ogre appears to fight them. They fight the ogre, but it's too strong, and when things start to look bad, the Goblin Slayer pulls out a magical scroll to deal a heavy blow to the ogre and finish him off. The High Elf, Dwarf, Lizardman, and the Priestess have taken a liking to the Goblin Slayer and stick around. The Goblin Slayer announces to them that he wants the team to get ready to hunt more goblins. Although they are reluctant at first, they do agree to join him. They get to a town named Watertown and walk to the Temple of Law to meet their questmaster, the Sword Maiden that had slain the Demon Lord 10 years prior. She requests that they deal with the goblins lurking under the city. The group go down into the sewers to hunt for the goblins. As they descend, they fight through small groups of goblins before encountering a weird threatening creature. However, the Goblin Slayer, being the strategist he is, decides to use the creature to their advantage, leading it to the goblins, resulting in a quick end to their lives. A job well done. The team then leaves the sewers for a break. The next day, the team gets ready to go back, but this time they have a canary with them. When asked why he brought the canary along, the Goblin Slayer said that the canary can detect the poison gas that might be used by the goblins. They explore the sewer deeper before finding a suspicious room. They break in and find a hanging body, but it turns out it was just a skeleton. Too late for them now, as they realize they have been trapped by the goblins. The canary is going wild and they have to put on masks to combat the poisonous gas and get ready for the goblin attack. The attack is gruesome and fast-paced as the team fights their hardest. Things go well for the team until a much larger goblin leader joins the fight. Things start to look really bad. But luckily, the Goblin Slayer gets a last bit of strength to strangle the goblin leader and scare away its minions. The group huddles together to make sure everyone's alright, but the Goblin Slayer then collapses. We are then taken to a room where the Goblin Slayer has woken up from his injuries. He's sleeping naked beside the priestess as the Sword Maiden comes in to talk to him. She had used her powers and the virginity of the priestess to heal the Goblin Slayer of his wounds. She reveals that she had to use the priestess because she's no longer pure, as goblins had taken that away from her. The Goblin Slayer promises to get revenge for the Sword Maiden. The Goblin Slaying team has returned to the sewers with a new tool, a bag of flour. They need to fight a magical demon eye and they have a bag of flour? Well, as it turns out, it can be used to create an explosion in the room and thus kill off the magical demon eye. The execution of this plan is done perfectly by the team. However, the loud explosion attracts all the goblins. The team discovers a magical mirror portal that can transport items to another realm, so they decide to use the magic mirror to their advantage. They take on the goblins and create another explosion before hiding under the mirror portal to avoid any debris from harming them. This lets them kill off all the goblins without the risk of getting harmed themselves. With a job well done, they meet up with the Sword Maiden, who congratulates them and gives special thanks to the Goblin Slayer, who told her that if she ever had any issues with the goblins again, she'll contact him about it. The Goblin Slaying team has, at this point, formed a good bond with each other as they joke around on their way back home from the difficult quest. The Goblin Slayer team celebrates their success. The Goblin Slayer then goes to the blacksmith to put his armor in for repairs. We then cut to the Goblin Slayer out of his usual armor walking about the farmland. It seems as though the red-haired girl is the only girl who has seen his face. They talk to each other and agree to go into town as they need to run their own errands. The Goblin Slayer goes to the blacksmith and picks up his repaired armor before then going to the Adventurers Guild to pick up a thank you letter from the Sword Maiden. The Goblin Slayer then gets together with his new friends and his childhood red-haired friend for some good food. Things are going well for the Goblin Slayer as we cut to him watching the stars with a red-haired girl who puts his head in her lap as they talk about their futures. The next morning, however, when the Goblin Slayer was doing his usual checkup for the farmland, to his shock he finds a large number of goblin footprints. He rushes back home to tell the red-haired girl and her uncle that the goblins are near and they need to leave. He can't protect them as there are too many, and they're likely being led by a Goblin Lord, the most powerful goblin that is capable of leading large armies. However, the red-haired girl gets all emotional and simply rejects what he says because she knows that it would mean he would be staying to fight the goblins alone. This puts the Goblin Slayer into a difficult position and he decides to rush over to town. He rushes into the Adventurers Guild and looks for his fellow adventurers who so far don't seem to like him. He bows his head down and begs for them to help him fight the Goblin Lord planning to attack the city, but most people turn his offer down. This leads to him giving a heartfelt speech as he begs for their help as he doesn't want to lose the people important to him. Before you know it, a brave and kind adventurer decides to step up and volunteer, leading to many others taking up the swords for their kind Goblin Slayer. The adventurers make their way to the farmland and set up their traps and prepare for the goblin attack that will begin at nightfall. The Goblin Slayer implements a great strategy for the adventurers and it's incredibly effective. The adventurers are able to slaughter the attacking goblins with ease, and before you know it, it looks like it could be a very promising victory for them. However, when news of this reaches the Goblin Lord, he's angered and sends his biggest and most savage goblins into the battlefield. This kills some low-level adventurers and leads to the veterans having to take charge. The battle is a gruesome one with blood being spilled all over the farmland. The veterans fight hard and are able to take the victory after quite a few close calls. During all this commotion, however, the Goblin Slayer had dispatched of the Goblin Lord's nest and chased the Goblin Lord. The Goblin Slayer had a cold look on him as he prepares himself to fight the Goblin Lord. The fight is fast-paced and gritty as the Goblin Slayer doesn't show any signs of backing down despite his many injuries. He's able to stab the Goblin Lord in the torso, but he gets beat down and is about to be dealt the final blow when the priestess comes in and uses her abilities to fight off the Goblin Lord and push the blade deeper into him. The Goblin Slayer then gets up and finishes off the Goblin Lord. As the battle comes to a conclusion, the adventurers get together in the Adventurers Guild to celebrate their incredible victory by drinking lots of booze and having lots of amazing food from the money they collected killing goblins. In this moment of celebration, the priestess asks the Goblin Slayer to take his helmet off for her, and once he does, everyone in the building stares in shock. They all gather around him. all of them looking at his face in awe as the show comes to a close. Thanks for watching today's video, and we hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.